Do you believe that Pope Innocent III, at the Fourth Lateran Council, are you familiar with the first infallible definition, there's one universal church of the faithful outside of which no one at all is saved?
Yes.
You've probably read that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Do you believe that that's binding and infallible?
Sure.
On what basis?
A bunch of them. How many do you need?
Oh, I just would like the primary basis. Why is it infallible?
It makes sense and it's rational, so therefore I don't need any further validation. Everything that's true is automatically infallible.
So if I say that something that makes sense, it's infallible. It's equivalent to that.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the papal office.
Oh no, it would, but since I've already accepted it as true, I don't need a further validation.
Is it distinct in any way from, a lesser speech that a pope would give?
You mean in authoritative status?
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Yes, it certainly could be.
But you're not sure?
It depends. It depends on what the pope is talking about.
But you're familiar with what he's talking about. He's saying there's one universal church of the faithful outside of which no one all is saved.
Except that it's authoritative and infallible.
Say again?
I'm sorry. I accept it as authoritative and infallible.
And do you believe that it's distinct? Can it be rejected by a Catholic?
Not without terrible consequences.
What consequences?
Damnation, ultimately.
How about heresy?
Yeah, again, a person who would deny that would be a heretic. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
That was my answer.
And based on what? Because it comes from a council? Is that the reason?
Based on the fact that it's a rejection of the teachings of the church.
But why is that a binding teaching of the church?
I don't know how to answer that. There's a certain point at which you can't answer a question because it is.
But that doesn't explain why. That you can't just say it is. That doesn't prove it. That you have to. What's the criteria for a binding teaching of the church?
Well, there's a bunch of them.
Okay, go ahead.
One is essentially that it accords with a properly formed conscience, that it conforms with revealed revelation, that it conforms with formal tradition, that it conforms with formal council teachings, that it conforms with formal papal statements.
No, those are not the reasons. Because a doctor of the church could say things that are in accord with revelation, that are in accord with a properly formed conscience. That doesn't make it binding, okay? So you don't know what you're talking about. A teaching of the church is binding, okay, if the magisterial authority is operating. And that is operating if the authority of the papal office is involved. Okay, and so you admit, even though you can't explain it, that that's binding because what you really should say is that the authority of the papal office is involved. Okay, that Pope Innocent III, speaking at an ecumenical council, that issued a decree on faith, and you can't reject that because that represents the teaching of the papacy, and to reject it is to cease to be one with the faith of the papacy and the faith of the church. Well, Vatican II, if you accept them as popes, is on the same level. Okay, Paul VI, the man you think is the pope, who was an apostate, who thought that there was noble Islam, thought that Buddhism is a religion of salvation, on and on and on. He thought that the Islamic faith binds us to the one God. Okay, that's apostasy. He officially approved and bound every document of Vatican II. And so the decrees on faith that Vatican II uttered would have to be binding in the same way of Innocent III. You agree?
No.
Why not?
Because Vatican II was declared to be a pastoral council, which without...
Where? Where was that?
I'm quoting.
No, it wasn't. That's a myth.
I'm sorry. Maybe I'm incorrect. What I was saying is there are some doctrinal quotes within Vatican II, which I found acceptable. All right?
But the idea that it's a pastoral council is a myth.
Okay, perhaps I'm wrong. That's my impression.
Well, yeah, it's a myth that's circulated among heretical, false traditionalist groups like yours and the people you know, that to try to, maintain your untenable position. No, John the 23rd said that Vatican II was representing of a magisterium which is predominantly pastoral in character. He didn't say the council was pastoral. He said that it represents the magisterium, which is pastoral in character. So even John the 23rd in that very speech says it's magisterial, and the magisterium is infallible. And so Paul VI solemnly approved every document of Vatican II. Here's what he says at the end of every document. He says, each and every one of the things set forth in this decree has won the consent of the fathers. We too, by the apostolic authority conferred on us by Christ, join with the venerable fathers in approving, decreeing, and establishing these things in the Holy Spirit. And we direct that what has thus been enacted in council be published to God's glory. I, Paul, Bishop of the Catholic Church. So the, quote, Pope is solemnly approving, decreeing, and establishing what's in Vatican II. So you would agree you'd have to believe that.
I'm sorry, what are you asking me to believe?
Does that not prove that solemn papal authority was given to the documents of Vatican II, in your opinion? How?
Well, it's exactly the point. You use substitute verbs when you said, therefore, that solemnly decrees confirm.
So that's not solemn language, according to you?
Yeah, once again, I go on the concept, as I've said before, and as I say again, the translation of those things into English is not necessarily valid.
Oh, boy. Well, that is absurd, and anyone can consult the Latin, and I already cited the Latin, so I guess in the Decree Nostra Aetate number 4, where it uses the same Latin verb, okay, we have the Latin text. And so...
How would you know you have the Latin text?
Because they've been published.
And my argument is that the people who publish these things are evil and altered the documents from the beginning.
Okay, so the versions that have been circulated in Latin and English, according to you, have been completely misrepresented, and it's a massive conspiracy at every level.
No, although it is a massive. It is, I say, as I said before, not that everything has been distorted. I don't know. But I do say everything is suspect, and I do say that there has been a conspiracy, and I do say that these things are suspect.
Well, the point is that by the very same criteria that you accept Innocent III's teaching as binding, you would have to, if you were logical, which you aren't, you would have to accept Vatican II as binding and its teachings on faith, including that the Church is in communion with Protestants, that Islam is a decent religion, that Buddhism leads to illumination, on and on and on. Let me ask you this. Does the Catholic Church teach that non-Catholics may receive Holy Communion or not?
No, not.
Okay, well, your church teaches that they may. It's taught in Vatican II, Orientalium Ecclesiarum number 27. It's taught in the New Code of Canon Law. It's taught in the New Catechism. It's taught in John Paul II's encyclicals. It's taught in his Directory for the Application and Principles of Ecumenism. It's taught in his speeches. Okay, I mean, how many more times does he need to teach it? So you reject the teaching of your, quote, Pope?
If that's what he's teaching, of course I do.
Okay, well, that puts you outside...
I understood you correctly.
Well, that puts you outside of the communion with your own, quote, Pope.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, because you can't dissent from his official teaching.
Right.
And you do.
And the Catechism is not an official authoritative doctrine.
No, there's something called the Ordinary and Universal Magisterium.
Sure.
Okay? So when a Pope repeats something over and over again as the teaching of the Church, that represents the teaching of the Ordinary and Universal Magisterium. He's repeated in every form. I mean, what form do you want it in? It's been in a council solemnly approved. We decree, define, and declare by our apostolic authority. It's been in his catechism, which was also solemnly approved. Okay, and I could give you the language on that. It's been in his Code of Canon Law. It's been in his encyclicals, officially published and taught. It's been in his speeches. He couldn't teach it in any other way.
Right. And of course he can teach error, except when he's teaching as,
Right, the magisterium, the Catholic Church's magisterium cannot teach error.
Well, of course.
Yeah, your position amounts to that the Catholic Church teaches heresy.
No, I didn't disagree with your position.
No, but you're not going to agree with anything because you're of bad will. But that's what your position means, okay? That's what it equates to, and anyone listening who's of goodwill can see that's what your church teaches. That's a fact. That's what he believes. Is it heresy for someone to believe that it's lawful for non-Catholics to partake in the Eucharist?
I'm sorry.
He believes that you can partake in the Eucharist and
I reject that position.
Is that heresy?
I'm sorry. I was speaking when you were speaking.
Is that heresy?
Good question. I believe it's an error. I don't know if it's heresy.
It's definitely heresy, because Pope Eugene IV defined that all those who are outside the church can't be saved and they cannot benefit from the sacraments, okay? And so to give people communion who are outside the church is to give communion to those who are in mortal sin. It is an evil teaching, it is heresy, and it conflicts with the dogma that there is no remission of sins outside the church, that you can only benefit from the sacraments in the body. So it's another heresy that he holds, but according to you, none of this matters.